for our weekly Sunday class. Thanks for joining us. I recognize all of you. I know I've seen you somewhere before. And it's heartfelt seeing you again. Hare Krishna. Welcome to anybody who's joining for the first time or recently getting introduced to the process of devotional service and bhakti. Very glad to have you here. I'm going to say a few Sanskrit prayers, which are to offer obeisances, means respects, to my spiritual teacher and the previous teachers who've passed down the message of Krishna over many generations. We'll do Mangalacharna 1. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishavanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Bancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Nitaina Mineche Namirhate Sharamulyenam Dite Chere Nitaina Mineche Namirhate Sharamulyenam Dite Chere Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Is there anybody who's new or new-ish on this call today that anybody knows of? You know who'd know is either Kotu Karnava or any of his crew. Today I'm going to speak from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is a verse spoken by Kapila Dev to Devahuti. And it's from the 3rd canto, 25th chapter, 25th verse. And it begins by speaking about the benefit of the association of devotees. Satam prasangam mamavirya samvido. Satam means of pure devotees. Prasangat means the association, and mama, my, virya, wonderful activities. Samvida, by discussion of, bhavanti, become. Bhavanti hrit karna rasayana katha. Hrit means the heart, and karna, the ear. Rasa ayana, pleasing. Katha. So the kind of discussion that takes place amongst devotees is very different than the discussion that takes place amongst non-devotees. First of all, non-devotees are preoccupied with satisfying themselves through sense gratification. And devotees are preoccupied with satisfying Krishna. And as an example of this, mostly people, when they take to householder life, and even when they don't, but especially when they do, are interested in it, in consuming and decorating their homes and decorating their bodies. So that means you have to get all dressed up, and you also have to make your house look nice and decorate it inside. And there's a lot of expense that you can take for that. However, and of course, there's a lot of conversation that takes place around dressing and taking care of your house. It's a perennial subject matter. You're in the material world. How could that conversation go on? Because here it's mentioning when you're talking amongst devotees, satam, the conversation is pleasing, spiritually pleasing. So the difference would be that devotees would be talking about how to construct a temple. You have to pour the same concrete. You have to put rebar down and pour concrete. You have to pick out the different materials for the temple, just like you do for your house. Only it's a transcendental activity. And when you're engaged in getting permits and talking about which materials to use, it's transcendental because you're building it for Krishna. So that kind of activity of building is not prohibited. It's called yukta. This is the benefit of devotional service. And as far as dressing goes, devotees, they dress fairly simply in order to please Krishna, unless they dress up in a fancy way to please Krishna. That's also possible. But the point is, they're doing it for Krishna, whereas a materialistic person is doing it for him or herself. And so the conversation that goes on around dressing, building, living, and acquiring various kinds of items, like you might need an oven or a refrigerator and so forth. When the acquisition is for Krishna, there's a different conversation. It's a transcendental conversation because it's to satisfy Krishna. I mean, after all, why are you getting a refrigerator in the first place? It's so that you can keep all kinds of goods to cook to satisfy Krishna. And who would know about that, that you could cook for God, unless somebody was a satam or a Vaishnav? Because this is the folly of impersonalism. If God doesn't have a mouth and you can't feed him, then you're left thinking like, well, I just have to think about feeding myself. And the conversation really then is, there's nowhere to go when you're trying to feed an impersonal God. But when he's personal, when he's standing right there and he has a beautiful mouth, and as we hear from Bhagavad Gita, patram pushpam palam toyam yomi bhaktya priyachati taraham bhakti paritam ashnami paritatmanaha. You can actually offer something to Krishna and he'll accept it. Then it's very engaging for the devotee. And there's a lot of conversation around food. For instance, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are pages and pages, verse after verse, describing the kinds of food, prasad, bhoga, that's offered to the Lord, and then it becomes prasad. In fact, the Raghavera Jali, the bags of Raghava that were prepared by Damayanti, were done so with the idea that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was an ordinary person and that he might get indigestion from eating certain kinds of things. So Damayanti went to great care to put extra ginger in some of the sweets so he could digest nicely. And also, when devotees get a new cloth, they don't just throw it on, they take it first and they offer it to the deity. And you'll find Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions in one of his diaries that everything that he uses is first offered to Krishna. It's all prasad. So the satam prasangama maviri samvido bhavandi hrit karna rasayana katha. Yes, there's direct Krishna Katha, hearing from the Bhagavatam, hearing about Krishna in the spiritual world, his putting himself in harm's way, like with the pastime of Kaliya, when he actually jumps in the Kaliya lake, splashes around just to agitate the snake, and then gets captured by Kaliya, and Kaliya is holding him in his coils. And meanwhile, everyone's fainting out of anguish, seeing their beloved Krishna in the coils of this monstrous creature that's poisoned the lake. People are dying. Birds fly over and die just from the fumes. And so we can talk about that. That's all about Krishna. In fact, Prabhupada turned the 10th canto into Krishna book, just stories about Krishna and what he does during the day, how he plays with his friends, how he interacts with his parents, how when Rohini goes to call him from playing, he's playing with his friends, and Rohini says, "Come home now, it's time to eat," because Nanda won't take his meals until you come home. And so Rohini goes back and the kids keep playing. They don't even listen to her because the other kids say that if you go home now, Krishna and Balaram, we're not going to let you play with us again. So out of fear, they stay and play with their friends until Yashoda comes. She has more weight. Nandakim Akarod Brahman is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that Yashoda, she's got the most intimate relationship with Krishna. She's his mother. He takes milk from her breast and thinks, "This is my mother. I have to go home now." So this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Shreya Evam Mahodayam Yashoda Cha Mahabhaga. How great is Nanda Maharaj, but even greater is Yashoda, because Stanam Hari, he's Hari, but he's taking milk from her breast as mother. So there's topics directly about Krishna. And then there are the instructions that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita. This is as Prabhupada says, the Vedic intelligence, and you can understand the intelligence of God in 700 verses. He gives a book that's so philosophically mesmerizing that the smartest people on earth can read it over and over and over and over again and find it to be deeper and deeper. By this, you can ascertain the Supreme Personality of God. That's also Krishna Katha. But it's also Krishna Katha to talk about the kind of cement that you're going to put in for the temple. And also, because Krishna appears in the Archa form, he accepts service locally from devotees. It is absolutely necessary for devotees to have this, because without getting attracted to feeding Krishna, dressing him, making outfits and garlands for him, and seeing his beautiful form and feeling the reciprocation when one serves him in that way, feeds him, dances before the deity, and so forth, then our propensity to dress will go to our kids, relatives. People dress their kids like little Barbie dolls, and they put them in shows. And they dress their dogs even, or their cats, with beautiful outfits. Prabhupada noted that there was a tomb at the Fisher Mansion when he bought the property there for the previous owner's dogs. Very expensive place. And sometimes the very wealthy people, they leave. In fact, I just heard about this recently. They leave their entire wealth to their pets. I forget the exact person, but of course the court reversed it to some point, saying that the person was incompetent. But that is the tendency, unless one has the vision of the deity to serve. So satam prasangamama virya sambido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata. When we're in the orbit of Krishna and the Vaishnavas, then there's always some kind of kata that's either Krishna's instructions, Krishna's lila, or a service to Krishna that's being discussed. And all of this is nectarian, and it's absolutely necessary. How does it work? Satam prasangamama virya sambido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata taj joshanad ashu apavarga vartmani shadaratir bhaktir anukramishruti. That by being around that vibration, that discussion of lila, instructions, and service-related kata, then naturally one begins to develop an attraction for Krishna. First, shraddha means that there's a sense of, I want to engage in service. Shraddha. Shrad means the heart, and da means where you place something. So you're inclined, you want to do it. And shraddha ratir bhaktir anukramishati. Rati means that there's a definite attraction and affection that develops. And bhakti means prema. One develops full love for God. And this happens naturally by coming into the environment in which the devotees are speaking about Krishna. Now let's read the last part of the verse. Satam prasangam mama virya sambido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata. I'll go up a little. Rasayana kata, pleasing, it also means medicinal. That the stories and the speech acts like medicine, and it's a joshanat, means cultivation. Very quickly, apavarga, one goes on the path of liberation, which means we're no longer stuck to the material world. The karmic reactions, that is the impressions in my mind that make me want to hear about the material activities of sense gratification for myself, for my relatives, for my family, but for my countrymen, everything related to the body. I become detached from that, and instead I become attached to apavarga, the path of liberation, the topics that come from the spiritual world. And then my path is called apavarga vartmani, which I'm walking on the path that takes me back to the spiritual world. Away from, where are we going away from? Pavarga, pa, which means that you're forced to work very hard in the material world. And then foam comes from your mouth because you work so hard. And then there's disappointment. And then there's fear. And then there's death. So apavarga means we reverse that process. Shraddha, rati, bhakti. The association of pure devotees. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation. And therefore, thereafter, he is freed and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. Purport. The process of advancing in Krishna consciousness and devotional service is described here. The first point is that one must seek the association of persons who are Krishna conscious and who engage in devotional service. Without such association, one cannot make advancement. Simply by theoretical knowledge or study, one cannot make any appreciable advancement. One must give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the association of devotees, because without the association of devotees, one cannot understand the activities of the Lord. Generally, people are convinced of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth. Because they do not associate with devotees, they cannot understand that the absolute truth can be a person and have personal activities. This is a very difficult subject matter, and unless one has personal understanding of the absolute truth, there's no meaning to devotion. Service or devotion cannot be offered to anything impersonal. Service must be offered to a person. Non-devotees cannot appreciate Krishna consciousness by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literature wherein the activities of the Lord are described. They think that these activities are fictional, manufactured stories, because spiritual life is not explained to them in the proper mood. To understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees. And by such association, when one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord, the path to liberation is open and he is freed. One who has firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes fixed, and his attraction for association with the Lord and the devotees increases. Association with the devotees means association with the Lord. The devotee who makes this association develops the consciousness for rendering service to the Lord. And then, being situated in the transcendental position of devotional service, he gradually becomes perfect. It's important also that, as Krishna tells Uddhava in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Madbhakta Puja Bhyadika, that service to my devotees is more important than service to me. By serving the Vaishnav, one is best pleasing Krishna. The Kanishta Adhikari is described, Archaryam eva haraye pujamya sharaye hate na tad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakrita smrita. This is the semi-devotee, the one who's just entering the path of devotional service and is very generously given the title of a devotee, but is called a prakrita bhakta, one who's materialistically attached. Such a person actually is exalted in his or her own way, as Kapila Dev will tell us a little later on in this chapter. Even the Kanishta Adhikari is extremely elevated compared to the rest of the population. However, the vision of the Kanishta is described that Archaryam eva haraye pujam yasharaye hate. Such a person has faith in Krishna only, but doesn't know the glory of the devotees, how to appreciate them or serve them, nor does such a person know how to do good for others, or have the inclination to do it either. And so the process of pleasing Krishna is taken up by the Madhyama Adhikari, who's Ishvare Taradineshu Balisheshu Dvisatsucha Prema Maitri Kripopeksha Yakaroti Samadhyamaha. The Madhyama, middle devotee who's moving about the world and giving Krishna consciousness to others, knows how to do good for others and distinguishes between four kinds of entities. Sees Ishvar, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and develops prema, sees the devotees and develops appropriate friendships, sees the innocent and gives as much kripa, mercy, as possible, and sees the envious and avoids them so that they don't become more envious. And so these are the 4 classes. Wow, Sundays, they happen in place, I guess. We're attracting all kinds of Vaishnavas here. Hare Krishna. The devotee who knows how to worship Vaishnavas is exalted in the Srimad Bhagavatam as being more advanced. The simple explanation of this is given by Srila Prabhupada, that love me, love my dog. And also, as Krishna himself says in the Bhagavatam, that the devotees are more dear to me than my own life. And in other ways, he expresses it as well. Saravo hridayo mayam, saranam hridayam tvaham. Devotees are in my heart, I'm in their heart. And nobody is as dear to me as the devotees. So serving in the association of devotees, one hears the transcendental vibration, and then by that association, one naturally becomes advanced step by step in the process of devotional service. So in the purport, Prabhupada mentions that the reason that many people don't understand Krishna, they think that his activities are fictional, is because spiritual life is not explained to them in the proper mood. And this is a product of the hearts of the devotees who know Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead and describe him. I was a recipient of this. I had been exposed to many impersonal literatures, because that's practically all that's out there. There's books about Buddhism, which I read. There are copies of the Bhagavad Gita that have commentaries that are more or less impersonal. And this is, we can practically assume that's what's mostly available to people in the world. I know when I did a wide search to find information about spiritual life at the library and bookstores and other places, I found all kinds of books, and none of them had the same mood as Prabhupada's books. I had the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and many other kinds of books, stacks. And then upon reading the Bhagavad Gita as it is, where Prabhupada comes out in the introduction and says, you should accept the speaker as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as he claims to be. Otherwise, you won't be able to get the gist of the book. And that made a lot of sense. However, when I came into the environment of the Vaishnavas in the temple that had been created by Prabhupada's association, it took a while to actually appreciate, although I didn't not appreciate it, but I didn't fully appreciate it until there was a click in my head, and then I did appreciate it. As an example, I remember looking at the Srimad Bhagavatam and wondering what all these stories were about. Like, why would you want stories when you're trying to pursue spiritual life? This is a product of impersonalism, because stories almost sound abhorrent to a mind conditioned to the impersonal aspect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But to speak of the deity, I had one person in Toronto, after a program we had, a loft-like program we had, say, I really like the Hare Krishna thing, but can I ask you one personal question? Sure. Why do you guys worship dolls? It's very hard for people to understand or see the deity until they've been in the environment of the devotees, which is a very special mood, where the devotees actually have become attached to Krishna and they love Krishna. So for me, I remember looking at the altar and being attracted mostly to the flowers. And I couldn't even see the deity, actually. But then hearing the Bhagavatam class, which is a daily affair, and then, of course, Bhagavad Gita, but especially the Bhagavatam, we were on the first canto. And in this first canto, we were in the section of Krishna in Dwarka. And there he was with his queens. And then there was a verse. The temple president, Bhutatma Prabhu, was reading from the verse, and he was saying how the queens could not quit those lotus feet. There was something about that phrase that just clicked in my head, and I felt changed all of a sudden. It was probably after a month or so of just being in the environment of the devotees, hearing Bhagavatam with the devotees, dancing for the deities, even though I wasn't even sure what they were for sure, exactly, or why we were doing it. And taking prasadam, this all-encompassing environment. Suddenly I felt, oh, I do like Krishna after all. And my shraddha for the deity awoke. And then I used to enjoy sitting there in the temple room and just sitting before the deities and just chanting. And for some reason, it felt really nice. And then hearing the Bhagavatam started to become nice also. So this verse is very practical. Satam prasanga mama virya samvido bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kata. The kata, the right kind of kata and the right mood in which Krishna's being worshipped as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the source of Paramatma, as the source of Brahman, as the source of everything, and as an eternal personality, not the unborn within Krishna, but actually Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In that kind of association, the verse says that actually, Bhavanti hrit karna rasayanaka tajjoshanad, very quickly it can happen. Tajjoshanad ashu apavarga vartmani. First of all, what happens is you're turned around from the path of birth and death and you start going towards the spiritual world. And then you get Shraddha, Rati, Bhakti. You can develop all of the most refined qualities of love for Krishna just by being in that environment and hearing about him. So anyone who comes into the community of devotees and regularly hears about Krishna, his instructions, his lila, and then is given some kind of service, will be able to come to the perfection of devotional service gradually, or tajjoshanad very quickly in geological time, and in the time that we've been in the material world. It happens very quickly by this powerful association of the devotees. So then Rupa Goswami gives the outline of what devotional service actually is in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He starts by saying, Anyabilashita shunyam jnana karmanyanavritam anakulyena krishnanushilanam bhakti rutama. So the words here are anushilanam means continuous, nonstop cultivation of devotional service that's free from any other motive except to serve Krishna. Anyabilashita shunyam. There's no other idea that I'm serving Krishna because I'm trying to get anything. I'm only doing it out of a sense of devotion. Anyabilashita shunyam jnana karmanyanavritam. And I'm not depending on my intelligence to analyze everything through jnana and karma. I've given up the ways of the karma kandis of trying to adjust my situation in the material world so that I can get out of it or that I can get more from it. Jnana karmanyana vritam anukulyena, and I render favorable service, anukulyena Krishna anushilanam. So the verb is shil, and it has two parts. One is called cheshta roop, and the other is called bhava roop. So cheshta roop means in cultivating devotional service, there are external activities that we can perform. We can use all our senses. And I kind of gave a summary of that a moment ago, just in alluding to building a temple or making garlands for the deities. And there are many other activities, fortunately, that one can do for Krishna. And they include using the senses in Krishna service. So this is the cheshta roop. We worship, we act for Krishna. We use all of our senses for Krishna. Like Maharaj Ambarish, he was a king and he had all facility for sense gratification, but he didn't touch any of it with his senses for sense gratification. He used it all in Krishna service. And he applied this principle of using his hands to wash the temple. He could have, as many kings do, tried to develop a homestead that was more for his own sense gratification or aggrandizement. I saw at Angkor Wat how the person who had created that, of course, there was a Vishnu temple there also, but he had the emperor who built it, his form was prominent in many places around, showing that he was the great king. The devotees who are kings or leaders, they put Krishna in the center. So you can engage all the senses, Krishna service, and then bhava roop means that one develops emotions for Krishna. And this is also a kind of a cultivation as well, that internally one develops a sense of service to Krishna from within. So how does that work? Well, actually, I'll just quote one more verse. Rupa Goswami then gives a verse it's parallel. It's a parallel verse. It says, Sarva Padivanir Muktam Tat Pratvina Nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhaktiruchite. There's a way that we use our senses, again, he says, to serve the master of the senses. Because these senses don't belong to us, they belong to Krishna. And when we serve the master of the senses with our senses, then they become purified and we become situated in our real condition. That is our transcendental condition. Our natural condition is to be in service to Krishna. That's our Sanatan position. But sometimes something that has an eternal condition or an eternal form or purpose gets diverted. For instance, examples given by Prabhupada that water, its dharma is liquidity, but under certain conditions it becomes solidified, it's hard. So when we become waylaid by our association with matter, and we start thinking we are matter, then we can come back to our eternal condition by putting ourselves in the right environment. And that includes engaging the senses in Krishna service. So then Rupa Goswami quotes from the Bhagavatam, the verses that you all know, starting with Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna, and describes the process through which, by engaging in devotional service and hearing about Krishna, one revives one's spiritual health and actually develops pure love for Krishna. So this verse is great guidance for anyone who wants to advance in devotional service. Means that we should organize our environment so that we're in the association of devotees, and we're in association of devotees especially who are engaged in hearing and chanting about Krishna and doing service for him. And it's very practical. I've seen many times people come to a sangha of devotees. We've seen it over the years at ISV. We're just sitting there minding our own business, talking about Krishna. And then we see somebody come in, and either, I mean, sometimes the kids have said this, like, my mom used to make me sit there. And I had to sit there for a certain amount of time, then I could go, and I was just watching the clock, and then I get up and leave. But after a while, it kind of grabs you. You think, well, I don't know what it is, but it's actually not that bad. And I've seen adults come who have all kinds of problems and thinking about woe is me, which is the mantra of the material world, especially these days. And then it's, listening. And then, wow, I actually feel better. I feel better than okay. Title of my new book, Better Than Okay. It's really hard to be okay in the material world. Like people say, how are you doing? And so people have to think about it for a minute. Oh, I guess I'm okay. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if I've reached that level. But if you're sitting and listening to Krishna Katha from somebody who's really absorbed in it, then all of a sudden you can just realize that I'm better than okay. That's the most impossible thing here in this material world, to be better than okay. I mean, people go to concerts and they end up, they can't see anyway, and it's too loud, or there's people intoxicated around them, and then they end up falling asleep on the floor. Every material circumstance where there's material sound vibration has some mitigating element that makes it so I can't hit that little level where I say, I'm okay. That's why people try to take intoxication, and that's a big mistake, because they as Prabhupada said, they feel like somebody drinks and they say, I feel like I've gone to the heaven. And then the next day, everything comes back to a worse condition than it was before. And then also they find out that they did stupid stuff. They're like, well, you're such an idiot. You know what you did? You crashed a car, you walked home, you broke your leg, you didn't even know it. And people take that to be pleasure. That hasn't reached the level of okay. It's a fake out. So to actually reach the level of being okay, it's not good enough just to add another material thing. You got a new shirt, got a new dress, whatever. It doesn't hit the mark. It may come really close, but it just doesn't hit it. But if you're sitting and hearing for a while, then all of a sudden you go like, I think I'm okay. And then a few minutes later, you might realize I'm better than okay. And like, how did that happen? It's never happened before in my entire life that I've been better than okay. And that can only happen in the transcendental vibration, because something that's subtle cannot enjoy or appreciate something that's grosser than itself. We're subtler than matter. And no matter what the sound vibration, no matter how fancy it is, no matter how good the musicianship is, the poetry, unless it's connected to Krishna, you can't have that feeling that I'm better than okay. What to speak of just okay? I mean, that's a banner day for a living entity after millions of births to all of a sudden say, you know what? I'm okay right now. Because nobody's okay in the material world ever. It's never happened. It's only happened in the association of satam prasangamam avirya sambido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata. So Krishna consciousness, pure devotional service, and the mood of serving Krishna with no other motivation is the only way to become freed from the clutches of the material nature. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Daiva hiye shagunamayi mama maya duratyaya mame veye prapadyante mayametam tarantite. The material nature is difficult to overcome. Sounds like an understatement to me. I once sat in a class in Los Angeles. The material nature is very inconvenient. My godbrother Sarvabhauma. came up to me afterwards and said, that was the understatement of the century. So we're in the clutches of Maya, and yogis try to get out of it. They try to beat the system and come to the level of being okay through meditation. Others try to do it through austerities. There are different philosophies. People try to do it through material adjustment. You just get a better place. That really doesn't work. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious, it's painful to watch. So the Bhagavatam is sublime, and then it explains, the devotees explain why it works. That when you're able to relish the activities of Krishna, and it starts to sound sweet to you, and Krishna comes to your mind, and verses about Krishna come to your mind, and you like chanting his holy name, then you can rise above the clutches of the material nature. And then when the waves of sense gratification inviting you to come back, I heard as a kid, my father used to read books to me, and there was one about a raccoon. Some kid had a raccoon. He tamed him. I was all attached to it. So, oh man, I want a raccoon. And then, the raccoon was at home, take care of it. And then one fine summer night, there was a call from another raccoon out in the wilderness, and their pet raccoon just jumped off the porch, ran away, and never to come home again. It's that siren call from nature. It's like, I got to go now. And it happens to even the yogis. Rikta matayo. Why? Because they don't have anything in their head. They don't have the vibration of the spiritual world in their head. And so when that call of the wild comes, hey, why don't you come with us to this stupid thing where you're going to injure yourself and end up worse off than you ever were before? Then you go, okay. Why? Because Rikta Matayo, you don't have anything better in your head. So Bhagavatam says, if you have the Leela and the beautiful pastimes of Krishna in your head, and you've tasted something unusual in the chanting, and you've seen the deity, and even one time you saw the deity and you felt like, this is nice. This is beautiful. You've tasted Charnamrita and you go like, wow, that was like the Ganga coming from a celestial world. Any of these things, you smell the incense. That's all it takes. One time, and you feel it. Then you've got something. You've got Krishna, the Krishna bug. And if you become situated in that, then the material nature can't carry you away. Otherwise, even the great yogis get carried away at any time when the waves come, no matter how many thousands of years they've meditated for and held back the senses. They have to be engaged in Krishna's service. So this is the safe path to become attached to Krishna, and anybody can do it by just staying around devotees and hearing from them in their association. And if you can be in the association of like-minded devotees who are more advanced than yourself, and you'll hear Krishna Katha, and you'll hear you'll pick up the right mood, non-offensive mood, the mood of service, mood of unalloyed devotion. And also devotees never consider themselves devotees. It's the death of the devotee. So I'm a devotee. I'm better than others. You find that in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita. Every person that Narada approaches says, I'm not a devotee, but I'll point you to a real devotee. And it goes all the way to the top, doesn't change, all the way up to Srimati Radharani. She'll point you to somebody else. This is the mood Srila Prabhupada's talking about, a mood of utter humility, of dainya, and of just unalloyed service. And then those who have an attachment for hearing about Krishna make it altogether real. Because when we're hearing in the association of those who are in rapture by hearing, then we go along with it. I notice at Govardhan every year, unless you get in the flow, it's really hard to just walk in off the street and appreciate it. Sometimes people come and they'll sit down, they'll come out, see what we're doing out there, and they'll come in. Not that I have any attachment for it. Somehow or other, I'm able to just hang around because they give me free room and board. But I notice sometimes when people come just to see what it is, and they'll sit down. It's like, is this all you're doing all day? Are you going to do anything else? and it's like it's really abrupt sometimes if you walk in. So gradually, if people can hear in the association of devotees, and they start that little click goes off in their head, like it did for me. That beginning starting point is like, wow, they couldn't quit those lotus feet. It said in the Bhagavatam, it's like, wow, Krishna, he has lotus feet, and they were attached to those lotus feet. So it's something that happens spontaneously in the association of devotees. A spontaneous love for Krishna actually awakens. I heard Prabhupada give a couple of examples. He said, in India, boys and girls used to get married when they were just kids. They wouldn't actually meet each other, but they were betrothed and they were married very young. And then he said there was no question of divorce, no question of divorce. And he said then they would be married, and then they would, they're married and they start to get to know each other, and then they get attached. And he said, then they have this relationship that was like quite natural and very deeply they were attached to one another. So he said, at first too, we're put together with Krishna. And then I was like, who is this anyway? Like, what does this stuff mean to me? What are all these stories? And like, who are these people? And what's this, dancing around a tree and all this kind of stuff? But, and then all of a sudden there's this attachment that just develops spontaneously by the vibration itself and by the association. So this verse shows us that that's the method. And one of the techniques for those who are eager to advance in devotional service is just to make sure that one is around advanced devotees and hearing as much as possible. Yat pada punkacha palasa vilasha bhakta karmashrayam gratitam ukatayanti santa tadvanna rikta matayo yatayo pirudha shroto ganas tam aranam bhajavasudevam. In that verse, I alluded to it earlier, that there's a hard knot in the heart. And it gets cut when one gets attached to Krishna and Krishna Katha. Yat pada pankacha. I mean, it's so beautiful anyway, the verse. Yat pada pankacha palasa. Vilasa bhaktya. Vilas means the enjoyment of hearing Krishna's pastimes. Karmashrayam gratitam. Udkratayanti santa. The devotees, the santas, just like in today's verse, satam prasangam, the santas, they cut the knot of material existence because of being their enjoyment, otherworldly enjoyment, transcendental enjoyment they get from hearing about Krishna. Tadvanda rikta matayo. Rikta matayo means somebody whose head is empty. So the yogis, it means Krishna is not in there. They didn't hear about Krishna, so you're defenseless. And when material nature comes calling, doesn't matter how strong you think you are, you're like that raccoon. He just jumps off the porch and goes running out in the forest. That's it. What happened to him? Call the wild, still attached. Only one way to become detached is become attached to Krishna. Let's just have a little discussion. You could ask questions that will stimulate the conversation, or if you want me to say something more about any one of the parts, then I'll try to do it. Ananda Murari Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. It's very nice. Huh?
Are you in Michigan?
Ypsilanti, yep.
Is everyone okay there?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Okay,
Um,
good.
yeah, just recently, a few of the devotees, I think they had COVID. Deva's just getting over COVID, but he's feeling fine now. And
Good.
since Shri and I already had it, we're doing good.
Okay.
So everyone's
Okay.
everyone's doing well.
Okay, glad to hear it.
Um, I was just appreciating this point of the the need to remember and be attracted to something beautiful, to be attracted to really Krishna's pastimes, what's going on with Krishna. And you mentioned to have, and I forget how you're wording it now, but to have an experience in chanting Krishna's holy name. Said something to that effect. So I was just curious if you could expand a little bit. What does it mean to have an experience of Krishna's holy name?
Oh, yeah, one thing I can say, if you listen to Prabhupada's kirtans, they're very simple, especially in the early days. He'd just sit in the park and he'd just chant. He had one tune. And if you catalog all of Prabhupada's tunes throughout his whole campaign, he had 3 tunes total. So it was one tune, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So how do you go from that by yourself in a park? You get kicked off the grass. You can't sit here, sorry. And then you move under a tree because you just got moved along. And you're by yourself and you go from that one tune, one mantra, to a international worldwide organization where there's huge temples and guest houses and a 500 million books distributed around the world, published, printed, distributed. How do you get from there to there? One thing is to look at and see what the holy name does, and when somebody chants purely, it has its own force. And then the other thing is, like, try an experiment. Like I tried this recently. It's like, I'm just going to chant one tune and not change it at all. I won't change the speed. I won't change up. I won't do anything. I'm just going to chant the same tune and just keep going until something happens. I'm not stopping until something happens. And so what happens? It works every time. And at first I'll notice myself and the chanters. It's like, okay, come on, where's the tune? And where's the change up? And where's the something? Come on. I mean, Prabhupada started with a bongo drum. He's got a picture of him in the park playing a bongo with his fingers. So anyway, we're chanting and chanting, and then all of a sudden you notice that it's not the tune, it's not the beat, it's not the musicianship, anything of that, because none of that's there. And then all of a sudden, devotees are better than okay. You just look at them, and you're better than okay, and you can see they're looking at you like, I was okay a second ago. I was not okay when I walked in. I hit okay about 10 minutes ago, and now I'm better than okay. And that's what makes the Hare Krishna movement. It's the holy name, and it doesn't need anything extra. I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything extra, but that experience you're asking about, anybody can have it anytime, really. And just um, take the holy name as it is and just experiment with it. So and then the result is that because you feel better than okay, and we're anandamayo vyasat, we are living entities, just want to have fun. They want happiness, and they go like, I have to have that again, please, because nothing else will do it. Everything else brings you up and slams you back down, and then you got to take twice as much. Little Jiva needs a new drug here in the material world. The other ones aren't working. And when they get the holy name, they say, like, that drug works. That's actually what I was looking for. And then Krishna says, yeah, okay, so a few things I'd like you to do. Be a little humble. Don't mouth off all the time. just start bowing down to me a little bit. And don't be so attached, little Jiva. And you can hang around more if you want more of this. And then, of course, volumes are written about it, but it's always there. I heard that once about some devotee was talking about always for kirtan, always depend on the holy name. Don't think like, I'm going to make this happen, but think like, I'm here to serve the holy name. Holy name will make it happen, makes everything happen. We don't make the holy name makes us. It's not like I can vibrate the holy name. The holy name can create me and vibrate me, but I can't really do it. So it's setting up that mood of service. Those are a few thoughts, Ananda Murari Prabhu. Is that okay?
Yeah, very much so. I like this point. It's something that I've been thinking of recently, that there's a Wu-Tang song clan, this like hip hop group called Wu-Tang Clan. And they have a song, the chorus is "Cash rules everything around me," but recently a friend and I were saying, "Grace rules everything around me." And I like that aspect of just showing up, and there's an active role that we play by showing up for the holy name, but then really allowing the grace of the holy name to guide us, and allow the grace of the holy name to vibrate us and to transform us.
Thank you very much, and for borrowing from the Wu-Tang Clan. Good to see you, Ananda Murari Prabhu. Thank you. Sukeshri.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Prabhu, you were talking about...
Sukeshri and then Devavrata. Go ahead, please.
So, Prabhu, I was just thinking about the story of Kanchipurna when he actually talks to Varadarajaswami, Swami, because you were mentioning about Vaishnava Seva. I was just thinking about two things that we have to make happen in our lives is no Vaishnava Prad and do Vaishnava Seva. So I was remembering when Kanchipurna was the only disciple of Ramanujacharya who would actually directly talk to Varadaraja. And everybody in the village would ask him questions and he would actually ask the Lord. So one day, one of the villagers asked him, would you ask the Lord if I will go back to Godhead? And Varadaraja Swami says, yes, he will go back to Godhead this lifetime. So then Kanchipurna gets very excited that he wants to know if he will go back to Godhead. So he asks him, so Lord, will I go back to Godhead? And he thinks for a little bit and he says, no, not really. And he gets very worried. He's like, out of all the villagers, you're just talking to me and I won't go back to Godhead. He says, because you're serving me and you have to go serve a Vaishnava. So then he makes it a point to go and serve Mahapurna, So I was just remembering that point that even though Lord may actually be talking to you, you might actually be in direct connection. Until unless you do a Vaishnava Seva, you won't go nowhere. Thank you, Prabhu. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, it's a similar point that Vrindavan Das Thakur makes in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. He says, if you worship Lord Narayan, there's some question about whether you'll go back to Godhead. You may or may not. But if you worship the devotee of Lord Narayan, then you'll definitely go back to Godhead. These indicators are there, yeah. Devavrata?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I was appreciating this point you're making about the holy name. And I've recently been making an experiment to listen to all of Prabhupada's classes chronologically from 1966 until his final classes in 1977. And one thing I'm noticing as I'm listening to the classes is one, Prabhupada's presenting the philosophy very simply and very straightforwardly. And the first bhajan Prabhupada actually sings is Bhaja Hare Mana. And he's singing it and no one really knows what the translation actually is. He's just singing it and the people are just kind of sitting there listening to him sing it. But people continued to come. And so I was kind of like, I've been reflecting on this point recently, like within my own execution of Krishna consciousness. Okay, Prabhupada, he's just chanting these simple tunes. He's presenting the philosophy very simply and very straightforwardly, the way as Guru Maharaj has presented it. And people are so receptive to it. And I was thinking, I was like, there's not so much that I have to adjust in terms of philosophy, in terms of the holy name, What needs to be adjusted is, the condition of my own heart, the purification of my own heart. And by purifying my heart, the vibration that I emanate actually has a bigger effect. Like, we have Jai Advaita Maharaj visiting the ashram right now. And he presents the philosophy in a very, very simple way. And it's things that I've heard before many times. He doesn't use any like new examples. He uses examples that you read in Prabhupada's books, that you hear in Prabhupada's lectures. But the same example that you hear in Prabhupada's lectures and you hear in Prabhupada's books, when he speaks it, everything just becomes so clear. Everything just becomes, so easy to understand. And you just develop like such a perspective, like, well, duh, why didn't I see like that before? So I was just thinking, on this point, we don't make the holy name, the holy name makes us. We just simply have to plug into what Prabhupada has given us and allow that to purify us and just become instruments for it. And so much can come from that. And so I was just reflecting on that in relationship to you and Nanda Murari's conversation.
Very important and pertinent realizations, Devavrata. So nice to hear them. Thank you very much for beaming in. Srivata?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I had a question and a reflection. I was hoping you could elaborate a bit more on detachment, because I feel like detachment is something that sometimes I always feel like I'm getting, and then suddenly I'll realize I don't have, because the moment I realize I don't have it is when it starts hindering my spiritual life, because my mind isn't able to like calm down. And should I just share my reflection later, Maharaj, or should I just keep
Yeah,
going?
that'd be easier. Otherwise, I might get distracted, because it's a very interesting question you've posed. What is the exact question? Could you say it in one sentence with 10 words or less?
Okay. Could you please elaborate on detachment and how to have a realistic understanding of how detached I am, basically?
It becomes self-evident. As Bhagavatam points out, tada rajas tamo bhava. Like tada means at that time, but it also, there's a kind of a phrase in America where you go, tada, means like, hey, it just happened. So tada is like that. It's like, tada, hey, I don't fall asleep in class anymore because I actually like this. That's real detachment. Ta-da! And tada rajas tamo bhava kamalubhadayasyaye. There's a point at which the practitioner actually starts to realize that I'm not being pinched anymore. Whereas before I was being forced to look here, look there, do this, do that, even though I thought like, this is not very good, but I still had to do it anyway. And then there's a clearing, and there's a feeling that, yeah, I'm actually feeling much better. Now, of course, there are a lot of descriptions given for our benefit about anartha nivritti, and about how it can be a little herky-jerky for a while, in the sense that, I feel a little detached and I get all exalted. I feel I'm, really made advancement. And then next thing I know, I'm sitting in the corner with a gallon of ice cream and a spoon, and, there's only half a gallon left, or whatever your anartha may be. There's a reason for that. I mean, partly, if these anarthas were so easy to overcome, then we just get a little purified and then go back and keep one foot in the material world and keep doing it again. But keep engaging again in material sense gratification. But the devotee becomes aware of the fact that my advancement in devotional service is so valuable when there's a little taste that this, I'm better than okay, and I've never been better than okay, ever. And it's like, I don't want to lose that. That's a good sign too. Because then, like, out of fear of losing what I have now, I'm very careful. That's a beginning stage of detachment. It's like, I have to protect what I have so far, what I've made so far. And then a realization, as is described by Vyasadeva, he says that the yogis, they become aware that when I engage in material sense gratification without any connection to Krishna, that leaves a hladini samskar, this impression of a pleasure from the material senses in the world. And he said, those are the worst, because then they're very hard to not revisit again and again. So he says the yogis are as sensitive as an eyeball. It's the most sensitive part of your body, because if you get one little hair on your eye, then you'll be disturbed. So they try not to re-engage in that. The devotees are more protected than the yogis, because they have all kinds of ways of engaging the senses that we already talked about earlier. But they also become aware of the fact that sense gratification is no joke. It's not something that I can dabble in and also be better than okay in devotional service, because it's sticky as anything, like mango sap. Once you get it, then it may not come back tomorrow, but it may come back the next week or next year or whatever. And it may be coming back to us from lifetimes ago. And so when a devotee comes to this awareness that I actually want to be a pure devotee, I actually don't want to stay in the material world, he or she becomes concerned about the re-engagement of the senses in the material world. But it happens by Krishna's grace. And this is something Kapila Dev brings up here in the third canto of the Bhagavatam. He says, just as when you eat food and it gets digested in the stomach, in a similar way, your practice of bhakti, hearing and chanting, serving in the association of devotees, digests the subtle body of the living entity, that with all the previous samskars that impel us to take this sense gratification again and again in the material world. What was your realization?
I was thinking about what you were saying about the holy name, and I was thinking about how you're talking about how we shouldn't come in with our own agenda when chanting the holy name. And I was thinking about this, like yesterday. I listened to a class by Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and Gaur Govinda Maharaj was he was talking about how a Vaishnava has childlike simplicity, and how he doesn't he gives this example every time of how someone approaches Guru and externally says, please give me mercy, but internally they're asking for all sorts of other things. And I was thinking about it just because I also was on Facebook yesterday, and I saw this this kirtan that was shared by Madhavananda Prabhu of Gaur Govinda Maharaj singing Nityananda Prabhu bhajans. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj looked like he was just so aloof. He was just like if a 5-year-old kid got a new toy and was just really just rejoicing with it. It was like he was just really, really enjoying it. And someone commented saying Prabhu, everyone looks so happy. And then Madhavananda Prabhu was saying the camera doesn't show everyone in the audience crying. And I was thinking about how Gaur Govinda Maharaj isn't necessarily like a professional singer or anything, and he always sings one tune for every single verse, just like Prabhupada, even though it's a different tune. And still it's so heart rending, and it churns your heart. So that's what I was thinking about.
Rending, heart rending. So there's another thought I have about this detachment, and it has to do with our seva. And we say, your seva will save you. And so it's important to become attached to your service, because even if there are pullings of the senses and there's some anartas there, duty calls, and we have to do our service. We continue with our service in spite of the fact that, I'm unworthy of it, and I have all these different anartas and everything like that. And staying engaged in service. I remember speaking of Jai Maharaj, in Vrindavan one year. We were celebrating Prabhupada's Tirobhava. And Jayaweta Maharaj was speaking about how he remembered how, when as a young man, he was given the service to work in the BBT. He was doing some literary things, transcribing, typing, and then editing and so forth. And he said it was very engaging. And he said he knew of others that, had taken to devotional service, and at that young age, they had been pulled away by their senses in different directions and had fallen away from the strict practice. And he said he felt so grateful that he had this service that was holding him in place. It's like, I can't go anywhere. I have to do this. So that's another very important aspect, because the service pulls you through the different eras of your life and helps bring you through the other side, because it's very rare that anybody goes, unless you're Shukadev Goswami, all the different ages of your life without getting tipped over one way or another. Because it's a pretty turbulent and eventful world. So better to have a rope to hang on to at the same time, because that can help even in times when you may not have you may not feel as steady as you were at other times. If you have your service and you say, no, sir, sorry, sir, I can't give up my service, sir. I'm here reporting for duty and I don't give it up for anybody. If you have that will also help pull you through to the other side in the way of detachment. Somehow or other, put together one lifetime of staying close to devotional service, going through all the different eras. You don't have to be Haridas Thakur, but you do have to stay in the practice somehow or other and keep coming back to it and stay in your service. Try to make it through the whole lifetime, through all the different eras, and you'll win. Ashraya Madhava.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Pranam. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. It just hit me when you said that, we don't make holy name makes us. And I was reflecting on that. I was thinking that holy name is not a tool for us to control our mind or our life. It is more like we are going to Krishna and saying, I have tried everything to control my anarthas, and show at the end I have come to your shelter. Please help me out, because I'm not able to control my life. I'm not able to control my mind. So please help me out. Please engage me. That's my realization. And that thing will, I think, stick with me. What you said today, because I had been, I think, doing it just the wrong way for so long. I was thinking that, I will use Hare Krishna Mahamantra to control my life, but actually I'm not in control, basically.
Yeah, it's a very important point, actually, and very nicely put, Ashraya Madhava. It's something that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta spoke about a lot, and in relationship with darshan and the concept of going to see Krishna. Actually, we go so we can be seen by Krishna. But what is he going to see when we go there? We should think about that. We should go and present ourselves before the deity. And okay, I'm here. That's why you ring the bell. Walk in, ring the bell. It's like, okay, I made it. I'm in here. Krishna, I came. Please look at me and acknowledge that I'm your servitor, please. And if we keep that mood, I'm not here to see Krishna. I'm here to be seen by Krishna. I'm not here for the holy name to control my senses, but I'm here to serve the holy name. It's very powerful. I just realized there's a treasure trove of questions here. Divyanga put a thanks up here. He's probably not awake now, but it's too late in Florida. Thanks, Divyanga. Radha Kripa put in a analogy. A 4-year-old stray cat that was rescued from the streets of Rome was inherited a $13 million fortune from its owner, the wealthy widow of an Italian property tycoon. They made a TV series about it. A question from Vijay Damodar Prabhu. He says, is it okay to leverage limited use of astrology in a sadhaka's life? Not to seek demigods to solve the bad times, but to get to know what are good times versus bad times so my energy is best channeled in Krishna service. All I have to say about that is good luck. I mean, it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen in the material world, even if you get a good astrologer, and it's hard to get a good astrologer. This is a point Prabhupada made. And there are people that can predict what's going to happen because it's a predictable thing. Same old stuff happens here all the time. That's why it's so boring here in the material world. But if you get an astrologer who's a pure devotee also, that's really helpful, but good luck finding somebody who's going to direct you like that. I mean, thing is about news, I listen to the news. I didn't say we, because I don't know if any of you ever listen to the news. I don't listen to the news, but I know in times when I do listen to the news, it's, at different times in my life, I've listened to news. I had a realization why. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, I was listening, and then I started thinking, why am I listening? And then I realized I'm trying to predict the future. I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And then I was thinking, like, nothing ever happens next. It only happens now. Like astrologers, weathermen, or weather people try to predict the future, what's going to happen. Yogis try to look at the present and see. Prabhupada once said, when Pradyumna asked him about astrology, is it in our Siddhanta? And he said, no, not really. I mean, Devarshi Bhutatna Nrinam Pitrinam Nakinkaro Nayam Nrani Charajan Sarvatmaraya Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Parihrita Kartam. We have all these debts and entanglements, but if you surrender to Krishna, you don't have them anymore. But Prabhupada said, if you know it's going to rain, take an umbrella. But he really, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta walked away from astrology. He didn't get into it. Prabhupada didn't rely on it. He never asked us to rely on it very much. He mentions it a couple times in his purport, just in a kind of generic kind of way that learned people know about astrology. But it's not really a Vaishnava thing to be totally into it, except some cases it's dovetailed with telling birth chart of Lord Chaitanya or something like that. But I'd just say in practical everyday use, if you read Prabhupada's purports, he's not really advocating for it so much. Since I am not past anartha and nivritti, I rely on material life to sustain myself. Astrology can help tell me which bands of time I will get discouraged often, and thus I can do regular sadhana, not adventurous activities, continue with regular job in bad times versus try something bold and new. Start new business or change job and save money to construct new temple. All right, if it's for the new temple, Prabhu, you can use it.
Thank
When
you.
times are good for me, well, still trust in Krishna all the way. Careful about getting carried away by it. It's really, there's several things Prabhupada said you could get totally absorbed in. And you can increase unlimitedly, actually, is what he said. Exercise, there's no end to it. Somebody says, hey, man, you're healthy enough right now. You look great, you're healthy. It's like, no, not yet. I have to. Jiva sitatva jignasya narto yaschaya karmi. Try to eat to live, not live to eat. So, yeah, we could look at a few things here and there. Also, eating, that's another thing you can do unlimitedly. And astrology, it's easy to get carried away because how much do you want to refine it? And how do you know? I mean, Karmani nirdahati kintucha bhakti bhajam. Krishna's taking away our karma. He's also giving us a special mercy by giving us miseries. So you may figure it all out according to the stars, and then he'll just reverse it on you and say, ha ha, stop trying to figure everything out. Jnane prayasamura pasyanamante eva. You don't have to. You don't necessarily have to, but if you do it a little bit, be careful, that's all.
Thank you, Maharaj. You also answered the second question, which I was going to ask you. Is it after Brahman initiation, and they say that Krishna has taken away your karma through the spiritual master. So after that life, is the life ruled by 100% by Krishna, or it is in the phase of ye yathamam prapadyante, even after Brahman initiation, to the extent one surrenders, will Krishna come and interfere with your life versus your karma leads your life?
When Ajamil chanted Narayan, he was saying, Narayan, Narayan, come here, Narayan, please come take your meals. Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. And Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami, in explaining how the living entity gets protected by Krishna, says he had no more sinful reactions. And then the question comes like, well, how come he was acting sinfully at that time? Because he went on with his debauchery. So our acharyas explain that it's like a snake when you take out the fangs. It's not scary anymore. Well, it's a little scary. But anybody who knows it doesn't have any more teeth, he's not afraid. So all those things he was doing didn't have any reactions because he was already purified by the holy name. Aparabda palam papam gutam bijam palonmukam krami naeva praliyante Vishnu bhakti ratatmanam. This is a verse quoted from the Padma Purana by Rupa Goswami when he describes when one takes to the pure devotional service, then becomes situated in his happy pleasure, because the causes of misery, the kleshas from previous karma, are eradicated by the process of devotional service. So by chanting the holy name, even one time, one can become freed from the reactions of sinful activities. Of course, you can reinvigorate if you go back to them again. Bhakti Rafaela said, yesterday wait a minute, I'm over time now. So thank you, everybody, for taking your valuable time. You're up late at night, some of you. It's past bedtime for many of you. And we did what we could. So we'll just end with a very short kirtan, if we may, just so we can chant the holy name at the end. Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine
Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshakarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Go Premanande Haribo. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Bhagavan ki,
Jai.
Shri Harinam Mantra ki,
Jai.
Shri Harinam Prabhu ki,
Jai.
Gaur Premanande,
Hari Hari.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaur Hari Bo,
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol.
Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshmi Nrsingadev. If you so desire, please protect all the devotees all over the world from the modes of material nature. Let them always stay fixed in your transcendental vibration. Please empower all the devotees here at ISV to be expert in your service and always hearing and chanting, taking shelter of Srila Prabhupada and the great Acharyas. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everybody, for being here. What a nice Sunday night. What a great idea to get together and hear and chant. We'll have to do this more often. Please keep up the great work. The images coming in from the Sankirtan are really beautiful. We had a couple of meetings with devotees around the world recently, and can see that everybody's interested and eager to stay engaged in this most worthwhile service of distributing books, keeping the holy name going, and take advantage as much as possible to read Prabhupada's books. Thoroughly don't waste any days, because if we treat each day as if it were our last, then one day we'll be correct. And it's good to be correct sometime or other. Thank you very much. Gaur Premanande, Vanchakalptarvishcha, Kripasindhavevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Nantakoti Vaishnavindaki Jai, Hare Krishna.